After discovering that he is the reincarnation of an evil spirit, a young man is trained by the Monkey King to face the dreaded Sea Dragon. Today we're going to recap the story of the 2021 movie, New Gods, Nezha Reborn. Passionate about motorcycle racing, a young rider called Li Zhang manages to win another edition of the amateur championship. After the race, he goes straight to Donghai, a city that suffers greatly from drought, but which is where he works taking extremely dubious goods from one point to another. When he arrives for another day's work, Li Zhang sees that a cat has been left among the goods and offers to deliver it, but when he arrives at the address, he realizes that there is nothing there and that it was probably someone who wanted to abandon the animal. Refusing to do so, the young man decides to keep the cat and takes it to his best friend Kasha, who thanks him for the cat. After giving the gift, Li invites her to dinner at his father's house and gives her a lift there. But halfway there, they end up passing Ao Bing's convoy, one of the leaders of the D clan, who is extremely interested in his bike and makes an offer. With no intention of negotiating, the young man ignores the offer and continues driving towards his father's house, Viejo Li. When they arrive at the place, everyone sits down to dinner and Zhang's father talks about how dissatisfied he is with his son's work, making the young man want to leave. On the way back, Li realizes that they are being followed and does everything he can to throw off the pursuit, but ends up having to stop because of a train blocking the way. Taking advantage of the gap, Ao Bing pulls up next to him and repeats the offer, but as the young man refuses to sell, he orders his men to go after him. To escape, Li Zhang jumps over the train and rides through the streets of the city, all while the D clan chases after him. Because he has more experience, Li passes through places that the others can't and is able to make everyone crash, including Ao Bing. But just when he thinks he's won, the young man is hit by an ice stake that throws him far away, causing the bike to fall right on top of Kasha. Suddenly, a giant avatar appears behind Ao Bing and throws even more ice crystals at the young man. Now that the rider is down, Ao Bing approaches him and stomps on his head while his men kick him, then walk towards the motorcycle. Wanting to protect them, the cat jumps into the vehicle and scratches Ao Bing's arm, who doesn't spare the kitten and pierces its chest with an ice stake. Seized by hatred, Li Zhang awakens an avatar of fire and attacks Ao Bing with a punch that sends him flying and burns the man's arm, revealing his dragon scales. Not knowing what to do, Ao Bing decides to back off and tells everything to his father's right-hand man, Yasha, who reports what happened to Mr. D, saying that they have finally found who they were looking for. Unaware of what is going on, Li Zhang wakes up in hospital and leaves Dr. Su impressed by the fact that he has already healed. At that moment, the young man remembers everything that happened and starts looking for Kasha, finding her lying on a stretcher with one leg missing. The doctor then says that they had to remove the limb and that the girl is still in danger, which angers the young man. On the way out of the hospital, Li meets Jinxuang and tells him about Kasha's condition, but before he can talk to his older brother better, some members of the D clan show up and form a line for their passing leader, Ao Guang, better known as Mr. D. As soon as he sees the young man, the tycoon apologizes for his son's actions and returns the motorcycle, as well as a suitcase full of gold bars and a card. Thinking it's a good offer, Jinxuang reaches out to take the items and his brother stops him, burning the card with his flames. Outraged, Li Zhang gets on his motorcycle and speeds off while saying that if he really wants to make up for what happened, he must bring Ao Bing's leg back. As soon as the brothers walk away, Ao Guang confirms that he is the one they were looking for and orders Yasha to eliminate him before the young man awakens his powers. On the road, Jinxuang drives after his brother to ask him to reconsider, but ends up being hit by a truck that throws him off the road. With a motorcycle coming towards him, Li Zhang slips under the truck and jumps out of the lane after his brother, standing next to him so that the young man can jump, but the pursuers haven't given up yet and continue to try to attack them, tearing the roof off Jinxuang's car with a whip. Still, the young man manages to jump on his brother's motorcycle and together they jump down a ramp, falling off the other side of a cliff. Even though they almost were eliminated, their pursuers manage to make the jump without any problems and it appears to trap Zhang with its tentacles. With the young man immobilized, the other henchman prepares to crush him with a giant steel ball, but Li manages to free himself by heating up his body more and more, burning the woman's tentacles and materializing a hand of fire to knock the sphere away. Even after the impact, the armored monster remains standing and tries to hit Zhang, but at the last second, a masked man appears and prevents him from being hit, knocking the creature down with a single blow. After saving Li, the stranger retrieves the monster's body and takes it away without giving any further explanation. When the battle is over, Zhang carries his brother back to the hospital and the nurses take him to the operating room, making Li feel even guiltier. At the D headquarters, Ao Bing asks for permission to finish what he started, but his father refuses and beats up his own son. Ao Guang then shows his scars and says that Zhang also left marks on his scales the last time they met, revealing that he is the reincarnation of the Dragon King and that Nezha has been reborn in Li's body. Continuing the explanation, Ao Guang tells his son that in every generation, they always eliminate anyone who seems to be the reincarnation of Nezha, because he does everything to disrupt the dragon's plans. Still not knowing who he is, Li Shang goes to the hiding place of the masked man, who finally reveals that he is the reincarnation of Nezha, as well as telling him about the draconian identity of Lord Di and Ao Bing. Curious, Li asks about the avatar that has appeared on his back, and the masked monkey tells him that this is the primordial spirit of Nezha, and that its purpose is to control him. From the headquarters of the Di clan, Ao Bing once again asks for the right to eliminate the reincarnation of Nezha, but the Dragon King denies it, saying that he is much more powerful than anyone can imagine. After his son leaves, Ao Guang tells Yasha that he's still cultivating the Dragon Pearl and that it's not time for the final showdown. But they can hire someone to try to eliminate Nezha in the meantime. With this goal in mind, Mr. D takes 2 suitcases of gold to the monkey and asks him to finish off Nezha, then leaves. At the hospital, Li Zhang is by Jingshuang's side when his father arrives and kicks him out, blaming his own son for what happened. In a rage, the young man goes to the parking lot and starts tinkering with his vehicle, but he gets carried away by his emotions and ends up causing a fire that destroys the motorcycle. In order to control his powers, Shang decides to go back to the monkey and asks him to train him, starting an intense session to tame Nezha's spirit. Before starting, the monkey says that because of the fire, he needs steel armor to channel the flames and protect his organs from burns. With this in mind, Li begins to design protection while making a prosthesis for Kasha. After some time, the 2 projects are ready and they can finally start training, improving Li Zhang's combat techniques and flame skills. Even after all this, the 6-eared monkey says that his pupil still hasn't mastered the primordial spirit, and that's why he still can't summon Nezha's avatar whenever he wants. After the training, Li goes to the courier's headquarters to work on his armor when Dr. Su arrives to talk, only to be interrupted by the D clan, who launch a surprise attack. Even though they are ordinary people, the workers try to defend themselves, but they don't stand a chance against a clan of dragons. To protect his friends, Zhang tries to take them all on at once and ends up getting distracted, not realizing when Yasha attacks him with his tongue. After almost hitting his target, the demon toad assumes his true form and spits out a giant weapon to take Li one-on-one. Unaware that he has trained, Yasha jumps on Nezha and tries to crush him, but the young man manages to defend himself with relative ease. Taking advantage of the distance, the mum's frog tries to hit Zhang with its tongue, but the young man manages to hold it back and summons his Susanoo to burn him. With him on the ground, Nezha goes for Yasha, who tries to defend himself with the shield, but thanks to the power of his spear, the young man manages to get through the barrier quite easily, leaving the toad all scorched. Without control, Li is still not satisfied and continues to advance on the enemy, but Su manages to calm him down and make him stop, allowing the dragons to flee. After the fight, one of the couriers goes to the D clan headquarters and sells himself to Ao Bing, betraying Zhang for 2 gold bars. Leaving there, the man goes straight to the hospital and starts sabotaging Nezha's armor, but a patient wakes up and catches him in the act. To avoid being discovered, the man tries to cover his breathing with a pillow, but realizes that Kasha is watching everything and breaks the patient's neck to go after her. Even with the prosthesis, the girl manages to run from one side of the hospital to the other while asking for help, but ends up falling down the stairs. With the girl cornered, the man approaches and is almost hit by something that explodes on the steps between them. Suddenly, several bombs are thrown in the direction of the hospital and Nezha puts on his armor to protect everyone, summoning his primordial spirit to destroy the explosives before they hit the building. To minimize the damage, Li jumps towards the explosives, but because of the loose bolt, he ends up off balance and one of the bombs almost touches the avatar's flames, forcing the hero to send his avatar back to minimize the explosion. Even without knowing what happened, Li goes all out against the members of the D clan and manages to stop the attack, but just when he thinks he's won, a warrior called Kaeyun appears and tries to hit him in the back. Thanks to his training, Li manages to defend himself and strikes back, piercing the girl's fan, but once again he loses control of his armor and ends up being disarmed. Even without his spear, Li Zhang holds his rival's sword in his hands and manages to set her mechanical arm on fire, forcing Kaeyun to flee into the shadows. After the fight, Zhang goes to the hospital where one of his friends tells him that Viejo Li is injured. As he approaches, the young man sees that his father has had his belly pierced by some debris and is about to perish. Taking advantage of his last moments, Viejo apologizes for having been so harsh and says goodbye to his son, losing his life soon after. While Li Shang prepares for his revenge, the six-eared monkey goes to the D clan headquarters and ignores all the security guards, walking past as if they weren't even there. In the center of the place, the monkey sees that Ao Guang is controlling the water spirits to cause a drought in Donghai, all to keep the other dragons imprisoned and feed the dragon's pearl. As soon as he sees the visitor, Ao Guang asks about the favor he asked of him and talks about the great increase in power that Nezha has had, accusing the monkey of having trained him. To make him pay for his betrayal, Kaiyun attacks by surprise and the six-eared monkey manages to dodge, but the Dragon King won't allow him to escape and traps him with the Silk of Chaos. At that moment, Li Shang arrives at the place and attacks Ao Guang, who tries to trap him with the silk, but as he is the true owner of this artifact, Nezha manages to get free quite easily. As it's not time yet, Ao Guang throws the beasts into the hole that leads to the bottom of the sea and decides to retreat, but the Dragon Prince doesn't agree and decides that he will stay behind to face him. Ready for the final fight, Ao Bing summons his Ice Susano and Nezha's primordial spirit also appears, causing a clash of powers that destroys almost the entire place. Deciding to appeal, Ao Bing assumes his final form and becomes a gigantic dragon that chases Li, trying to freeze him with its breath, but the young man manages to dodge everything and charges at the enemy. Just then, the Dragon Prince pulls out a golden beam and throws it towards Nezha, hitting his belly so hard that a few more bolts come loose from his armor. Even so, Zhang doesn't give up and goes all out on Ao Bing, summoning his primordial spirit to land a succession of punches on the dragon's head. To end the fight, Li uses all his strength and manages to rip out Ao Bing's spiritual spine, causing him to fall to the ground completely lifeless. Even though he is victorious, Zhang is badly injured and Kaiyun takes the opportunity to attack him by surprise, but the monkey reappears and manages to defend his disciple, defeating his opponent quite easily. With the monkey about to eliminate Kaiyun, Li asks him not to do it and asks a little more about her past, prompting the woman to tell her story and show how much suffering Nezha has brought to people. After the vision, Zhang asks his master to let her go and asks why he helped him, discovering that the six-eared monkey is actually Sun Wukong, the powerful Monkey King. After the revelation, Wukong throws Ao Bing's body into the hole and explains that this is the passage to the East Sea, saying that at the bottom is Ao Guang's palace, where the Dragon Pearl is being cultivated with Donghai's fresh water. After the explanation, the Monkey King says that Li can't do anything and that he's not the real Nezha, because he's full of kindness and wants to help others, while the true spirit of the demon child was feared by the gods themselves. The Monkey King goes on to say that Nezha's avatar only appears when he is angry, but because he is such a kind person, Li will never be able to control this power. Thinking that what he said was true, the young man returns to the hospital and receives the news that Jinxuang has woken up to find his brother crying over his father's body. Seeing the scene, Li apologizes and the traitor blames everything on him, but Kasha shows up and tells him everything she saw. When they find out what really happened, the other delivery men go after the traitor and he decides to use Kasha as a hostage, but the girl manages to defend herself and pushes him back, causing the man to fall through the hole in the wall and crash to the floor. With things calmer, Li buries his father and begins to mourn his fate, but Kasha and Su manage to cheer him up and the young man becomes determined to prove to everyone that they are wrong. Already wearing his armor, Zhang summons Nezha's avatar and begins to tease him, saying that he will save everyone while the powerful primordial soul remains hidden. But it doesn't work and Nezha's aura disappears, leaving Li Zhang to jump alone into the hole that leads to the East Sea. In the water, the young man swims towards the castle when he is surprised by a mechatronic shark that almost manages to swallow him. Using brute force, Li opens the cyborg fish's mouth and jumps onto its back, riding the monster while some giant crabs and crayfish try to hit it with harpoons. After several maneuvers, Zhang arrives at the waterfall and manages to defeat his enemies in midair. After defeating them, Li gets back on the shark and swims with it to the castle entrance, continuing on foot from there. In the center of the building, the young man sees the water spirits trapped in his silk and tries to free them with his hands, which causes tsunamis that can be felt all over the east. Just then, Ao Guang appears with Su as a hostage and starts attacking him, leaving Kaiyun to deal with the doctor. Trapped, the doctor manages to turn around even without her powers and activates a mechanism that crushes Kaiyun's arm, making it impossible for her to move. Further down, Ao Guang goes up to Nezha and throws a punch that sends him flying into a pillar, firing a blast of shock with his staff immediately afterwards. Even so, Zhang manages to get up and goes for the Dragon King, punching him in the stomach, but the man is completely shaken and Li's fist goes through his body with his enemy's arm trapped. Ao Guang summons a kind of black mud that also traps Zhang's legs, leaving him with no way of defending himself against his electric punch. Just above, Kaiyun manages to get free and goes to the doctor who is hanging from the roof. With Kaeyeon about to eliminate her, Sue decides to let go and starts to fall, but manages to catch herself on a chain just below. Thinking she was eliminated, Lee is seized by his demonic instinct and manages to break free from the pool of oil, piercing Kaeyeon's neck with his spear and charging at the Dragon King, who is hit even with his mud shield. Thinking he's won, one of the water spirits helps him up and tries to get closer, but when Zhang tries to touch the creature, it's eliminated by Lord D, who returns in his draconic form. To defeat Nezha's spirit, Ao Guang decides to go even further and swallows the dragon's pearl, unleashing dragons that will cause storms and tsunamis all over the world. Wanting to prevent this from happening, Nezha takes the silks of chaos and tries to keep the dragons trapped by brute force, but the fabric can't hold and breaks, freeing the water spirit and the dragons who were trapped. With Nezha on the ground with his armor off, Ao Guang approaches to celebrate his victory and starts punching him while saying that the city of Donghai will be destroyed because of him. Even with practically no strength left, Zhang manages to gather his last energy and covers his body in flames, agreeing to sacrifice himself to incinerate Ao Guang, turning to ashes along with him. In the spirit world, Lee meets the primordial spirit and decides to ask one last favor, begging Nezha to save the people of Donghai from the tsunami. Suddenly, the spirit disappears and, on Earth, Lee's body begins to glow. At that moment, the silk of chaos reconstructs itself and completely covers its owner's body, forming a lotus flower around him. In the center of the sphere, Zhang is completely engulfed in flames and then explodes, eliminating the dragons around the palace. As the lotus blooms, Nezha sends out his silk, which pulls the dragons out of the tsunami, lifting them out of the water and into the sky. This stops the tsunami and causes rains all over the world, allowing the people of Donghai to have water again. Now that the world is safe, Zhang opens the sea with his silk and returns to the surface, where he meets the Monkey King, who confirms that he is indeed the reincarnation of Nezha.